Let me read you a simple version of the story of Nehemiah when he rebuilt the wall around Jerusalem. Nehemiah's brother visited him from Jerusalem, and Nehemiah asked, "How are you and the rest of the Jewish people surviving back in Jerusalem?" But his brother looked sad and answered, "Not well. The wall around Jerusalem has been torn down. The gates have all been burned. The city is unprotected." Nehemiah sank into his chair and dropped his head. For days he mourned. He fasted and prayed. But God moved his heart. "O Lord," he pleaded, "I'm going to ask the king for a great favor. Please put it in his heart to be kind to me." Nehemiah waited for the right time. One evening, as he carried the king's wine to him as usual, the king looked up and asked, "Why do you look so sad tonight?" "Long live the king," Nehemiah exclaimed. "I'm sad because I found out that the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins. The wall has been torn down. The gates have been burned. The people are unprotected." "How can I help?" the king asked kindly. Nehemiah prayed a quick, silent prayer. Then he answered the king, "If you are pleased with me, your servant, please send me to Judah to rebuild the city wall where my ancestors are buried." Now, not only did the king say that Nehemiah could go, he also said yes to Nehemiah's request for a letter to the manager of the king's forest. "Tell him to give me wood so that I can build the city gates again, and the walls, and a house for myself," Nehemiah requested. And the king ordered army officers and soldiers on horseback to go with Nehemiah to protect him on the long journey back to Jerusalem. Nehemiah finally reached Jerusalem. After staying there for 3 days, he rode around on his donkey at night to determine the damage. He found that he couldn't even get through some of the gates into the city because they were so plugged up with fallen parts of the wall. Then he spoke to the city leaders and to the people living there. He told them how good God had been to him and how God had helped him so far, and how thankful he was to God. "Let's fix it," he said. "Can't you see the trouble we're in?" And so the people began to work, and they worked hard, and they worked together. But their enemies did not want God's people to build their protective wall again. "What do these people think?" they laughed. "Their wall would collapse even if a fox walked on it." But the people kept working. They worked shoulder to shoulder, family next to family, working on the wall that was in front of them, working in front of their houses, their shops, and their churches. Then Nehemiah told them, "Get your weapons and guard the wall with one hand and work with the other. Our enemies are all around us." And so they continued to work, swords, spears, bows, and arrows in one hand, and their work tools in the other. "Don't be afraid of the enemy," Nehemiah said. "Remember the Lord. We work for the Lord," Nehemiah encouraged them. Many times the enemies tried to stop the rebuilding work, but Nehemiah prayed constantly, and God gave him the courage and the wisdom to continue. And the wall that would protect Jerusalem was finished in just 52 days. God moves our hearts. Don't you love that part of the story when Nehemiah felt within him that great sadness when he heard that the people of Jerusalem were unprotected because the wall had been destroyed and the gates had been burned, and God moved his heart. And God does move hearts. God moved Nehemiah's heart to do something about the wall. Now think of our own country's history and how people like Nelson Mandela and Bishop Desmond Tutu had their hearts moved to the injustice that people had to suffer. You think of nature conservationists and their fight against poaching. Their hearts are moved in some way to do something about people who are killing rhinos and other wild animals. Boys and girls at school, the ones that are kind to that boy or girl who sits by themselves at break time or who stands up to the bully, those actions, those small and seemingly insignificant things that people do to show kindness every day, is often because God has moved their hearts, because God does. There's something inside us. There's actually a physical feeling, a response to something that is from God. He moves our hearts. And when God moves your hearts, when you feel that feeling that something needs to be done, then you know that God is prompting you to do the work. A couple of weeks ago, I met a man called Wilhelm de Wet, and he lives in Bonnievale in the Western Cape. And the amazing thing about him is that God moved his heart to build a school to do something about what he called chronic unemployment in Bonnievale. And so he decided, brick by brick, donation by donation, square meter of land by square meter of land, to build a school. And he got the whole community involved. Every time he asked somebody if they would volunteer, whether that was the architect or the civil engineer or the person who was going to hire them the equipment to do the actual work, or the person at the spa who just needed to buy one brick towards the project, he asked, does this vision live in your heart? Because Wilhelm de Wet understood that God moves people's hearts, and when he does, they can do amazing things. And so what he did was he built a technical school that at the moment has a 100% pass rate and a huge employment uptake, because he's designed the curriculum to be able to make those young people of Bonnievale employable. And I think it's quite an amazing example, just a little example of what can happen when God moves our hearts, because heart work is hard work, and that's something we mustn't forget. When God moves our heart, it's not to do the easy thing. It's quite often to do the hard thing. Heart work is hard work. I often think that people don't like to work hard. So if you think about the fact that there were people when Nehemiah was not living in Jerusalem who were, and they were living amongst the rubble and between gates that you couldn't even get through because they were so filled with rocks and burnt debris. And yet they were living there. They did nothing about it. Hard work is hard work. And so I think of examples. I think of Nehemiah, who actually went and built the wall again, and of Wilhelm de Wet, and the fact that he actually built a school. But the hard work doesn't stop there. Sometimes it's hard work to stand up for somebody who's been bullied at school. Sometimes it's hard work to get up on a Sunday and know that instead of coming and enjoying a service and singing with the rest of the community, you're actually going to do something. You're going to serve at the door by greeting people. You're going to help at the sound desk with the audio visuals. You're going to arrange flowers. Perhaps you are a volunteer in the mission box, or you're serving by leading a fellowship group in your own home during the week. Hard work is hard work. It's not easy. But if we don't do it, if we don't roll up our sleeves and actually do the work, who will? And that's a question that I think is worth asking again and again. We have to be people who are prepared to fix what is broken. We have to be sensitive to what God shows us by moving our hearts towards them, and then we have to do the work. Try and imagine for a moment, when we're talking about hard work, what it must be like to move rocks this size. This isn't an ordinary wall. We're not talking about the wall around your house. We're talking about a wall that people could live in. It was thick and high and built with rocks and then stones pushed into the gaps to keep people safe from attack from outside. And so with all of that lying on the ground as rubble, it must have been an enormous task. And I'm sure the people would have thought to themselves, the reason we're not going to rebuild this wall is, first of all, we are exposed to our enemies while we work. But more importantly, it's just too much. I mean, where do we even start? And Nehemiah had a plan about that. And I think that that's one of the massive values and lessons that we can learn from his story, is the fact that he didn't expect everybody to build all over the wall. He just asked them to build on the wall, to work on the wall outside where they lived. And so I love the idea that heart work is here work. Where should we work? We'll work here. And so Nehemiah had the families of the people of Jerusalem, the leaders and the priests, working where they lived, working where they worked, working where they worshipped. And so each and every family took responsibility, fathers, mothers, sons, dogs, no, not dogs, and definitely not cats, they were just watching. But everybody in the family, servants and masters, all working on the wall where they lived. And because they were working on just that piece of the wall got finished in 52 days, because everyone had just a small role to play in a very big thing. And one of the things that worries me, the gaps in the pews. And I sometimes think, how will we get everybody back to face-to-face worship? How will we get people back to gathering here at Newton Park and at every other church around the world, where they say gathering is down by 40% internationally? How do we get people back together? Well, work where you live. Your work is here. And so I love the idea that if I just ask the people that usually sit in the pews around me, but who I haven't seen for a while, why not come back? Perhaps I'll make a difference there. And if each and every one of us starts to give out that message to the people that we miss and love and hope to see again here at Newton Park, if we just start doing that work, well then before we know it, this massive task of filling these pews again will be done. But we just have to do it, because heart work is here work. And here might just be in the pew behind or in front of you. So Nehemiah needed motivation. Now, he had people actively laughing at him, telling him that it could never be done. You'll never build the wall again. His enemies, and I think these aren't the people who are trying to kill the people of Jerusalem. These are just nasty people. We're going like, if a fox walks over this wall, it's going to fall down. I mean, what kind of wall builder are you guys? You're never going to do it. And in the face of negativity, in the face of all of those naysayers who are going to say, it can't be done, nothing can be done, you're wasting your time, you need some form of motivation. And so we get to that point where heart work is worship. And Nehemiah knew that. Before he asked the people to fix the wall that they'd been living around and were quite satisfied to live around broken, before he did that, he told them how good God had been to him. He told them the story of how God had helped him. He told them how thankful and grateful he was to the grace of God and how blessed he felt. And then they worked. And when their enemies threatened to overcome them, to attack them, to prevent them from building the wall, Nehemiah prayed, thanked God for the many blessings and for the help, and worked on as an act of worship, because heart work is worship. It is an expression of thanking God for the many blessings we have. And so when we feed the hungry, yes, it's so that they're not hungry anymore. But it's also an expression of how grateful we are to God that we are not hungry. The same when we serve in the church. It's an expression of service to God. It is an expression of gratitude. That's why we work. That's where the motivation comes from. And I think that Nehemiah saw that. And so he described that to the people. And therefore, realizing that every stone that they lifted from the ground was raised to God's honor and glory, motivated them, and they got it done. When I met Wilhelm de Wet, the man who built a school in Bonnievale, he said this: nothing is impossible if it is an expression of our gratitude towards the kindness and grace of God. Positivity, he said, is infectious. Sacrifice is inspirational. When you lead with a can-do attitude and show your commitment by sacrifice, others will follow. And so he got an enormous number of people to work with him, even in the physical work of clearing the field for that school in Bonnievale, by leading by example. And Nehemiah was the same. I can't overemphasize that beautiful image of family working alongside family, because Heart work is teamwork. Heart work is all hands on deck. And it was only by working together, following the inspirational example of Nehemiah, that they got it done. This is an actual part of the wall that Nehemiah built with those people in Jerusalem so many thousand years ago. They built it while their enemies were upon them. While they built, Nehemiah said to them that they must work with one hand while they carry a weapon in the other to be able to defend the work and the wall and each other. The work was that important that the people of Jerusalem were prepared to fight to do it. That's a great way to end a lesson on heart work. God moves our hearts because heart work is hard work. Heart work is here work. Heart work is worship. Heart work is all hands on deck. But it is work for which you should be prepared to fight. It is something you'd be prepared to sacrifice for. It is the work that God has moved your heart to. And not only would you be prepared to give your life for it, but you'd commit your life to it. Heart work is a life's work. Heart work is something worth defending. My prayer is that God would move your heart to work as an expression of worship and invest your life to mending the broken things that are right in front of you. Now let's revise. God moves our hearts. Heart work is hard work. Heart work is here work. Heart work is worship. Heart work is all hands on deck. Heart work is a life's work. Heart work is worth defending.